Welcome to Paper Cuts and Plot Twists, where the paper is dangerous and the plots are twisted.
Paper cuts, what's the risk? Just another day in the life, just another plot twist. But is it a tragedy, a comedy, romantasy, just another fantasy? It's paper cuts and plot twists. The rest we'll wait and see.
So today I'm joined with Amber Champagne. You may have remembered her from episode 1. She was with us during Moral Dilemma. She's a vampire. She'll tell you a little bit more about that. If you really want to hear about her vampire issues, because there are a few, she's running from the Vampiric Council, or maybe not running, but there's a whole thing with that. And you want to go back to episode 1 to really get the dirt on what was happening. But she has some really good insight on storytelling. So I really want to talk to her and just welcome you back, Amber, for the podcast. I appreciated you being here in the inaugural episode. And I was inspired by you because your love of Shakespeare. And that's why I did Hamlet. And I was like, oh, Shakespeare is full of moral dilemma. Like everybody has a dilemma. And nothing like an angsty vampire, which is, I think, how we both kind of concluded Edward in Twilight. That was awesome.
No,
Yeah,
so
so
true.
thanks for being here.
Oh my gosh, of course. I'm happy to be here anytime.
Yeah, this is fun. We have so many background conversations about storytelling. And when you did Moral Dilemma, what was kind of your first thoughts on that topic? And how did you kind of come to the process and conclusion of doing the Vampiric Council? I mean, that character is hilarious, and you've been doing it for a while now. And it kind of goes along with ethist and how everybody that uses your product is going to end up looking like that they haven't aged and they're going through life as some vampire, essentially, just because
Yeah.
there's no signs of aging, apparently.
First of all, it's fun to do. So I think
Yeah.
that's like what ultimately just like drives me to stuff like that in general. It's like it's fun to play a character. My 704th birthday is coming up in just about 2.5 weeks. So it's just fun to be in character. And I love to play with story lore
Mhm.
because I guess in my opinion, there are people that are always following along for long periods of time, and they're kind of seeing what you're doing, and they get attached to different storylines and characters that you create, and it's just like really fun to always keep playing into it or always keep bringing it back up so that
Mhm.
people are like, oh yeah, I remember that, oh my gosh, and then it's like funny because some people who come across it and they're like, wait, what is this lady talking about? She's a 742-year-old vampire.
The
Almost, not there
confusion.
yet. I'm almost 742. Don't make me that old.
Yeah, in a couple years.
But it's like, you get that initial like, huh? But then people that are following along know the lore, they know the story,
Mhm.
they know what's going on. And so it's those breadcrumbs that I love more than anything, I think, when I'm kind of like creating stuff like that. But you asked how I got to doing that piece in Moral Dilemma in your
Mhm.
podcast. And when I thought about Moral Dilemma, I immediately thought about vampires. Because they're just always on my mind. And how many moral dilemma questions are a part of that trope, so to speak, right? Of
Right?
vampires, like, and in their story and where they come from and what they do. And is it ethical? And are they, what's going on with them? What's happening with their soul, especially? And that
Mhm.
was like where I was like, okay, I think we could dive into this a little bit, mainly because I guess I just have to put that hat on at certain times. And then I'm like, I know, oh, yeah. Hello. Hi, Vampire Amber. What do you think about this? And that's just kind of like what my original thought process was when I got into there. And then I think you and I had talked about Twilight
Yeah.
and just like
Edward.
going down that road and
He gets
Edward.
really angsty, right? Like, he starts like, exactly what you said. Like, "Do I have a soul? And then if I condemn Bella, will she not have a soul? And, like, if I don't have then I'm condemning her to this life."
Yeah. And you're
So
like,
very
Edward,
angsty.
get over it. My God. Like, honestly, I mean, I think
Kind of.
that's what I was pulling out immediately. And that's kind of like the road that I went down, where it was just like, yes, there are all these questions, but how long do we sit in those questions
Mhm.
before moving forward, before, making a decision that we have to like move on in life? And it's like the same thing, even with Hamlet, like just like,
I
sitting.
mean, he gets very angsty, you're right, like, he just ruminates, and, I mean,
Yeah.
granted, he has a, like, legitimate concern, I mean, that
Yes.
his uncle, like, betrayed his dad and killed his
Yes.
dad and essentially taking the throne from him, you know, like,
Yes.
he's the heir, but he won't and then he's worried if his mom, has another kid, then, that'll be the heir of the throne, and yeah, that's in and with the Edward vampire thing, when you talk about moral dilemma, the real issue is that humans, we ask those questions. It's not like we're putting it with a vampire, and that's like an extreme form of that question, but the reality is sometimes we ask those and have those debates. Do we have a soul? If we have a soul, what does that mean? What does that even look like? Is that different than a mind? Is that, and so we ask those questions, and it's funny how stories kind of illuminate the questions we really have, but using this extreme but it's not really even a trope. It's more of, vampires are age old, like, they go way, way back. It's part of, like, the human psyche a little bit, like, this idea, and maybe it's related to spiritual things, and then those spiritual things become traditions and folklore, and that folklore carries on, and it becomes the vampire, and then we start writing novels about vampires, and the questions are still the same. There's very human questions, but they are just we give them the voice through a vampire because that's the most extreme situation to ask that question. I wonder, do they have a soul?
I have a lot of questions about that. It's something I think about a lot, especially because for me, I have recognized a lot about my own soul and what that looks like and how to
Mhm.
resonate in that experience. And I think there's just so much. I mean, there's so much there that I could unpack from like a
Right.
human perspective, from a goal oriented perspective, from a life perspective. Like, and I do think that there is a lot to be said, a lot to be said for our soul, which I
Mhm.
believe is just encased in this flesh
Mhm.
suit, doing its thing.
The flesh
And
popsicle.
yeah,
Sorry, I heard that from something recently. It's just like, no.
it's so true. And so it's like, and I think even humans grapple with the idea of if they do or do not have
Mhm.
a soul or what that looks like. And so, you know, for me, in the lore of a vampire, I guess it just looks at like what kind of story you're looking at, right? Because we have a lot of different vampiric stories. We have vampiric stories where vampires are just absolutely ruthless.
Right.
They could care less about anything, and they just are demonstrated killers.
Yeah.
Truly.
Right.
We have stories like Twilight where Edward is kind of going back and forth and wondering, "Oh my gosh, what?" And you have to think to yourself, if Edward is even asking himself these questions,
Mhm.
doesn't he have a soul?
Right, I
Doesn't
mean,
he
that
have some
like,
kind of
that's a
moral
good point,
compass,
right? Because it's a
right?
human thing, and he was human, and that's the other thing, and honestly, zombies are kind of on the same spectrum of this, is that they were once humans.
Yes.
So, that's where you get that complication and that rootedness in human reality to this fabled creature, like with a vampire or the zombie, which is kinda dumb and you feel a little bit bad for because he loses his whole identity. He's going through I mean, that could be and the thing too about the metaphor of how many people can we look at that just are like zombies through their life, meaning they're not
Mhm.
even asking any questions, they don't even care, they just want brains, and they want intelligence, and they're seeking after it, but they're numb, and they're dumb, and they
Yeah.
wanna consume it. It's a great metaphor honestly, it's a great metaphor, I think, for what we deal with online, where people will assume your identity, and they will consume your intelligence and replicate it for themselves. And it's mindless. They didn't do the work. They didn't, and so they can mimic you. And with
Mhm.
bots and things like that, it's kind of this digital zombie world where it's people are just, you don't even know if they're real and they're just consuming intelligence and eating away at real lives and real people. So it's funny how, like in Moral Dilemma, you talk about these things, or like a vampire, it really does. It stands in for the things we're really dealing with, and actually, I love that. I love how lore and how fantasy and fiction and all of these topics we can explore through not just, like, story, but just, like, fiction specifically. Like, the true value of fiction is to tell the truth by using these very extreme and strange concepts into the body of a vampire or a zombie or
Yeah.
whatever. And I know you're fond of the zombie too and
Yes.
zombie lore.
Yeah, I am. I love it, and you're right on because it's the commentary behind it, right? It's like,
Mhm.
this is why I love writing animation, because you can make it so wildly wacky, and you can
Mhm.
do all of these like wondrous things and imaginative things, but it's all to get you to understand the story of the commentary that's behind it. And it's just like, for example, with Project Z, the zombie animated series that I wrote, that series is literally commenting on exactly what you're saying. The people who just walk through life
Mhm.
not knowing like what's going on, not making any real decisions for themselves, trying to find out who they are. You know, it's like it's that zombie lifestyle essentially that they end up finding out that that's really what's going on here. You know, all the tropes and things that we thought we knew about zombies, like once the
Right.
apocalypse happens, it's like, oh, wait a minute. No, it's not. And then they just basically like rebuild the world in the same ish way. And you're like, what are you guys doing? You know, and the whole point is for them to eventually unfold that this is what's going on and that there's a need to move forward in a different way, right? Like eventually in the series, like that's the purpose of them to like to get to that point, to open their eyes, to see the awareness. And it's like, and I love stuff like that because it's just like, or like the newer animated series that I'm working on, which you know a lot about. It's like it's all over the place, but there's so much commentary, right? On
Right.
like on moving through places and understanding how you know get from one to the other, and understanding like team and human dynamics, and it's all that like commentary inside of there that you can play with in the animation world, especially.
Mhm.
That's just like it's so fun. It's just so interesting to take something that is so has so much lore and fantasy
Right.
and fake, you know, aspects to it, and bring it to life in like a really real way that feels like a human who is having a real human experience can connect to.
Yeah, I find that those real human experiences, there's a couple things based on what you were saying. And yes, knowing a little bit more about your story. One, it's the thematics. It's the theme or the where the commentary sits and becomes this theme. You don't state it outright. It just pervades throughout the whole story. And that can be in the decision of the setting or the decision of the interactions of the characters or what type of characters you use, what they say to each other, how they interact. Those set up this big world all surrounding this theme. And the commentary is really the conversation that you're having with the reader on real human things that get anchored to reality. And I think that's also the beauty of it. Like, and going back to zombie and vampire, just in those two alone, they're anchored to humanity because both were once humans. They've transformed and now they're dealing with these other problems. And it's like, there's almost like a recover. And I think you see it in vampire lore, like they're trying to recover their humanity. Vampire Diaries, I think, is a good example of becoming more human by interacting with all the humans and like not eating them. Like it's like the
Yeah.
minute that you don't eat them, then like you're more human. And so that's interesting. And it's funny how those stories influence each other. But again, they wouldn't work. There's not a story that would work if it isn't anchored in real human things, in real human commentary, human desires and needs and wants, hope, aspects that we're all kind of craving. And one of the examples, and I think I shared it in the podcast with, talking about Twilight, is that I had a neighbor who had muscular dystrophy. And it was progressing. And she had this longing. It was almost like castle building for her. She was reading the book because she really wanted to be like Bella, to have a choice that somebody would turn her into a vampire so she wouldn't have a broken body. That's weighted that desire is weighted in a real human suffering. Like she really wanted the perfection of like speed or sight, or because she feels the powerlessness of her situation and all she wanted is that freedom. And so it speaks to even that. It was a side of that lore that I didn't understand until talking to her, that I was like, "Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense." Like it makes sense that we want to escape to something that's better, which is weird to think that vampires would be the better option because they're bloodthirsty and and there's not some good vampires out there,
Yeah.
honestly. But, the desire is there, right? So I think it is interesting how you can make the commentary like in your work. And honestly, you use it professionally. You use storytelling professionally. Like you said, you create characters. And I think even how you said you create lore, something that people almost like Easter eggs, something people can find and go back to. You change it. It's not like I think with your business, you have several characters that represent different aspects of how people might engage with your business. So different people are having different entry points based on the story and the lore that you're creating. Can you just tell me more how that's worked in storytelling for business professionally? That's a really beautiful aspect because humans are storytellers ultimately,
Yeah.
and in every facet of our life are telling some kind of story. I think it's
Yeah.
cool how you've used it.
Yeah, and it's so fun to do, but you're right. It's incredibly impactful because it's like what you're saying. When your friend was resonating with Bella because these are all the things that she wanted to potentially have a choice of. It's the same kind of thing that I think people connect to in these characters. Like for example, Judy. She's a
I
hot
love
mess,
Judy.
right? Everybody loves Judy. She's a hot mess
She's so
because you know
great.
why everybody loves Judy? Because everybody is Judy in one
Everybody's
aspect or
Judy.
another.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
just
Judy is me.
it's what it is. Yeah, and it helps people to recognize that, like, and then they see it as they see it as me in a way because it's me actually playing the character. There's no avatar or anything for that one.
Right.
So it's like it's me actually like playing the character just with my rhinestone sunglasses. And it's like so it's almost like it helps people to relate to me personally, whereas like a lot of times people see me in an elevated position because of all the work and healing and different things that I've done to get to where I am. But I'm still human. I'm still, making mistakes. I'm still doing all of the stuff. I still have my many Judy moments. So it's like it helps me in that way, but it also helps people to connect to the character herself and recognize that everybody needs to care for themselves. Even the messiest of the messy, like there's ways that you can go in and you can care for yourself. So like somebody like her, that's a really great way that it connects to people. Or if you look at, like, the vampire, for example, the vampiric, like, side of things really helps people to understand, like, what's going on from a skin perspective, right? Youth, eternal glow, all of the things that, like, go along with that, and so it's like, it's speaking that message to people constantly, almost subconsciously, like, that it's just like, Ethist is eternal youth, right? Ethist is, like, gonna give you the best possible skin that you could have. Ethist is gonna give you the skin that you could compel somebody with as a vampire, it's like it's giving you all these, like, subconscious messages. So I think that's, like, ultimately what connects people to the characters. And then, for example, like, I have my new HR character. That's
Oh,
a lot
the
of
microwaving fish is so disgusting. I'm sorry.
I know, and that sign actually that was in that video was put up in the tech office that I worked at. So this is so like this is a exclusive sneak peek into the background of my life that nobody knows that that sign actually was put up on a microwave in the tech office that I worked at because somebody was doing that. So she's in there to really like get the corporate side of things, like the tech start to build into the tech era. But then there's also going to be ethos entering the chat, which is going to be more of that the character for System Overglow and connecting in terms of tech verbiage and that side of things to like people who are devs founders inside of the like more it's more like the language and wording and all of the stuff that we're going to be using that will then tie to them. So it's like every time we try to there's a lot of groups of people. Self care is important for everybody. And there's a lot of groups of people that we need to connect with. And so creating characters that people can resonate with in each one of those arenas is really helpful because it takes the onus off of me too, the pressure off of me, you having to connect with me. Maybe some of you do, to a certain extent, but not everybody is always going to resonate with me. And also, like, Ethist is its own brand. It needs to be out and in the arena, like, on its own. So it's like, how do we get to do that? We do that through characters that then resonate in each one of those areas. And I think that it works amazing. I mean, it works amazing. We've seen it. And one of the most successful things that we've done through mimetic marketing is the character thing.
Honestly, it makes a lot of sense, and you're right because the product itself is good. It stands up on its own. It doesn't need that extra story because of somehow you're trying to prove what it can do or what it can't do because it works for everybody. But not everybody sees themselves in certain ways. Like, not everybody sees themselves clearly or understands their needs in the perspective of how it can work for them. And I think that that is interesting. How stories really work is they feel intimate, and in feeling intimate, they are also universal. That's what makes a story good. Out of all of the stories that we've talked about, no trope, like the tropes are like people will be like, I really like fantasy, and they love fantasy and they'll read lots of fantasy. But truly, they really want a good story. And a good story is going to surpass fantasy. It'll be just good. And I think that people that identify and say, I like this, that's their entry point. But the truth is, if it's a good story, it's universal. And so your appeal to your different markets and your different audiences through telling stories using characters is that valid reality of we are all looking for some reflection of ourselves, what we're dealing with, what we're struggling with, what our pain points are. And stories have been both a balm to me in moments where I've need like there's an author, Katherine Center. Every time I read her stories, they're rom-coms, but she's very effective at research. And I read one Things We Save in the Fire, and I learned all about fire. And the character is a woman firefighter, and it goes through her story. But there were moments in that story that I was like, wow, it almost felt like she wrote it for me. Like she wrote that one line or that one character was for me. And it was just so strange. And it seems like every time I pick up her books, I notice that it feels personal. The themes are universal. They're human themes. The story is well written. I believe the characters. It's a personal look into that character. So I get some empathy for a life that I've never lived. I've never been a female firefighter. It's very well researched. And I think that's the thing that storytelling really does. It really connects us to the truth of that intimacy of seeing ourselves, but also the things that we'll all look at the same point and we all see ourselves. And that's kind of like what you're saying with Ethist. It's like you've created the skincare, it works for everybody, literally, including me. Like, honestly, like the only thing I'm pissed about, and I'm saying this to you for real, is that if people still think I'm younger than I am, it's frustrating. Like this isn't helping my case.
I
If my
know.
skin gets better, they're like, don't think that I'm old enough to know things. I'm like, dude, I could be your mom. Like I'm
I
way older
know.
than you. This feels like the perfect moment to pause and take a minute for self-care, to rest our minds, and bring to you a word from Ethist by our friend Christina, who was in episode 2 on fantasy. She shared about her love of fantasy and the Harry Potter series and why it's such an important genre. I learned so much in that episode. And honestly, I'm so grateful for Amber to be here and her support of both the press, King Ari Press, and our podcast. Please check out Ethist Skincare. With that, I want to give Christina a chance to share a little bit more about why we love this brand. And then we will be back in the podcast and we'll hear more from Amber herself.
You ever notice how some brands love to say clean beauty, but when you flip that label over, it's anything but? That's where Ethis Skincare comes in. This line doesn't just meet the clean beauty standard, it literally redefines it. In fact, Ethis raised the bar for the whole dang industry. Ethis uses microbiome-friendly, skin-healing ingredients that actually work, helping with tone, texture, hydration, breakouts, and aging, all while protecting your skin barrier. It was made by a licensed esthetician who got tired of the gimmicks and wanted something real. And it shows. Ethist has nothing but 5-star reviews from people across the world, and personally, my skin has never felt or looked better. Ethis Skincare, cleaned up, leveled up.
It happens to me too. I'm like, can you leave me? I'm like, no, I'm not 20 years old. Thank you. I mean, jeez.
This reverse aging thing is like crazy. So, the vampiric effect is real
It
and
is.
frustrating in a wonderful way because I would much rather have better skin than worry about that. But having to prove that I am old enough is frustrating. Although, I look older than I finally am catching up, but not fast enough. So, yeah, I love how you do use storytelling because the real thing that I've learned, it is the human condition to tell stories. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, you're finding ways to connect with each other by telling our stories through history, through these characters or thematics, or really commenting on what's happening in society, like we talked about with zombies. What like, when you were a kid, what was the kind of stories that you were drawn to? What was speaking to your heart growing up? Or even now, like, what speaks to your heart when you, like, go to, like, read a story, or you're compelled in some way to pick up this book and it really speaks to you? What draws you in most, maybe the most of anything, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense. I think I've always been someone who was looking for weirdness because I'm weird. So I wanted to relate with weirdness. I wanted to know that there was other weird people thinking weird things, and like how weird can we get?
Mm.
Truly. And I think in being an Enneagram 4, like being someone who wants to be an individualist, but
Yeah.
also like craves for other people to be like, wait, do you get me a little bit? Like, does anybody get me?
Yeah, right.
And you're like, yeah, obviously you're not the only one, you weirdo. But it's like, it's just that it's that pull of that type of personality that's like what I've always looked for in stories. I've always looked for like magic, fantasy, kind of weird things. Alice in Wonderland, Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland is one of my favorite books of all time. I have been reading it since I was a little kid. I still have it on my bookshelf to this day. I have it in special limited edition, vegan leather, etc. Like it's like, and the thing that draws me to that book so much is just all of the odd things
Mhm.
that he wrote in that book. And how even though they're so strange and there's so much like weirdness in it that it makes so much sense. It's like when you truly read, some of the quotes that you'll find in Alice in Wonderland, they sound so like backwards and upside down and turned around. But when you look to the context of like what he's saying,
Mhm.
you're like, wow, they're very profound. There's a lot of profound things that have like epiphanies essentially that have like come to me just
Mhm.
rereading some of those quotes for many, many years. And it's like, it made me feel like the weirdness that I have, being a different type of person and loving to kind of lean into the strange. It was like, that it was a little normal, that there was like, that there's all these like weird characters out there, the Mad Hatter, the Cheshire Cat, like all of them, they're all out there. And it's like, and I'm not the only one. And so like I was always looking for stuff like that.
It's
Anything
like
that could be,
validation, and again, that it's isn't that a weird thing though? It's both the individualism and universality, like,
yes.
we're all kind of weird together.
That's the struggle of my nature. Like in
Yeah,
general, it's like I said, it's that pull like back and forth. It's the struggle of my nature being like, oh my gosh, I'm so strange. And yet somehow I fit in this weird big puzzle, and there's so
right.
many other people like me. So yeah,
Yeah, you're a different kind of weird that's like everyone else. And then
yes.
you all of our weird together makes one kind of perfect picture. That's true. And that's I think that is the beauty, is that you can feel both the intimacy and the universal appeal, because one, it does talk about things that are something that we maybe all struggle with. But maybe it's also the author. I wouldn't say when I'm reading a story I don't need to see the author, but it doesn't mean that I don't see the author. What I mean by that is that the author disappears, the story comes forward, and I'm reading the story. Whatever the author wanted is on the page. And the better the author does that, you don't see the mechanics, you just see the characters living their lives, doing their things, thinking the things that are important to them, and it relates to me personally. It feels intimate. And yet, the themes really hit on metaphors and collectivism. I love when I read a story that hints at other stories, or isn't you can see the influence of the author, that like, oh, you could tell that they were influenced by Tolkien or by C.S. Lewis or Shakespeare or Dickens. And that's super cool to me. Like, that's like, I love that because it feels like we all understand the same thing. We're speaking the same language. So I feel like there's like part of the club a little bit.
Yeah.
But I also think that the author has this signature that is so unique to them, that is unlike anybody else. Like, it does not matter if they write a book, you know it's them. Like, the way they write, the language they use, and even though you don't see them in the work, they're there.
Yeah.
Their fingerprint is in the work. And I love that too. Like that again, it has that beautiful uniqueness that could only be that book, that author. But yet it has like these influences. It's like The Wasteland. This idea that you bring in all of these references and all of these I mean, like Shakespeare, how many books has he been like reflecting in? Like people take his work
So
and it's
many.
like you see reflections of Shakespeare everywhere.
Everywhere. I have an homage to Shakespeare in my Project Z pilot.
Oh, you do?
Yes,
Which
because
Shakespeare, play is it?
it's Romeo and Juliet, and it's
Ugh.
she has, like, a moment they have a moment about her drinking an energy drink and how it burned her tongue, and she's like, "And thus with a sip." Like, it's like it's the whole, like,
Yes, good.
thing. It's like and you would only I love that you're saying because it's like that's what I try to do in my own writing, and I watch people like Mindy Kaling, for example, is a great example of this because when she has been in her own shows and then you can see her obviously doing her thing, but she has also written shows where she is not in them at all, but you can still see her fingerprints like in the writing and in the way that the narration is or the characters talk or like all right, but it comes off in such a way that it's like even though it's her and so for me I really admire her as a writer and I really like her styling and everything, so it's like I love watching any show that she's written because I'm like I can feel Mindy behind it, but
Yes.
I don't see Mindy in it. I
Right,
see these other
exactly.
characters who are like doing their thing and it's like and so it's like it's a really cool that it's a really cool process to be a part of when you kind of like come along the journey with somebody who's like writing as they're like doing their thing and obviously like we're not connected in that way. I'm not saying it in that way, but I'm saying it more like it's like we are there is a connection point of watching somebody's writing journey and
Yes.
seeing them go and then seeing them in their projects and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." And it's just like but yet you don't see them in the project. And that's what makes
Right.
in my opinion a really good writer because once somebody is like, obsessed with your styling essentially and really just loves all the things that you make, then it's like if you can do it where you are still doing all of that, but you're nowhere to be found,
Mhm.
chef's kiss in my opinion.
No, I mean, that's exactly I think that's exactly the trick of all of this to say, and you and I were talking about this in the background, and I kinda wanna close with this because I think the way that we've talked about it is there's a joy you brought this up, the joy of the story. This idea of it's not just storytelling, there's a nostalgia here. And I think and this is kind of a challenge I'm gonna pose to anybody listening to reclaim some joy that you had as a kid reading those books that you loved. Because you and I are creating so many stories. We've worked together on different things like working through plot points with some stuff with scripts. So we both are writing manuscripts and you in particular are writing more of like pilots and things for screenwriting. I have some screenwriting and then I also am working on a novel and we always talk about like storytelling and different ways that we engage creating characters, thematics, all of that. We talk about, you and I actually get into a lot of mechanical discussions, which probably is boring to so many people that would listen. But
To
when
me,
you have the same language and dialogue, like we can talk about things in scripts that people would be just like, oh my gosh, like just tell me the story. But all of the mechanics and what you just said is that we have a fingerprint and the closer we get to owning our style and our ability to tell stories in a particular way. I know you have a very distinct fingerprint that is not mine. And yet we come together and we can talk about all of the things that make up a story and you will take it and it will become this thing. I will take it and it will become this other thing. And we're talking about the same thing. And I think that is so beautiful because we are carrying through our voice conversations we're having together. And that's awesome. And I think the challenge for listeners right now is to reclaim the joy of what stories meant to you as a kid. Joy of finding and discovering a character that spoke to you like, Amber, like you said, Lewis Carroll, like Alice in Wonderland, the fact that it could speak to you in a time that you wanted validation, that you wanted to know that you were both the only one, but not alone, like that. And I think Yeah, Alice in Wonderland could definitely do that if you're looking for weird in beautiful ways, and so that's my challenge, but Amber, I think with what you're talking about, we do get into the mechanics, we do talk about storytelling a lot, and I know that we both have this joy for both the creation of the story and finding our way through the story, and we love it so much. We love the process, we love every part of it. We talk about that ad nauseum. What do you wanna say to somebody that's listening right now that would be the best advice you could give them to reclaim the joy that they had as that kid, that nostalgia for a good book, a good story? What would you say to yourself at that age if you had lost your way in storytelling? What would you want to remember? How would you reclaim that joy?
This is so specific. This is so oddly specific, but I did this recently, and I think it's really a cool way to kind of capture that joy of reading. And I told you specifically, like, I have a hard time getting into stuff like that sometimes.
Mm.
It's like that's why I go back to the same books that I know and love and just enjoy reading. But I think like this is gonna sound maybe crazy to some people, but getting into theme when you're reading a book is really fun. So recently I started reading The Picture of Dorian Gray. I
Mhm.
keep mentioning this. I have literally no idea what happens in this book because I'm still reading it.
I won't say.
So I don't know. I was enthralled from the minute I started reading because it was all about art and the exploration of art and, just kind of like understanding like, what he's thinking and what's what and all of that. And that's just really personal to me. So I immediately was like thrown into it. But I have this like old version of it that I got from my dad, and it's like an old, like vintage, book. And immediately I just felt that vibe. Like I said, like it was like, it basically just threw me back into an era. So I'm not even kidding. I got on like all of my like flapper gear and I just like walked around. This is real life. I walked
Right.
around barefoot, like in my house, just with this book, like as if I was like, just some random flapper in the 1920s and I had nothing better to do than read about art and literature and like just like made myself a character essentially to play while reading this book. And I had the most joyous day just picking up the book and reading it and putting it down and playing
Yeah.
with art and picking up the book and reading it and putting it down and doing something else that I was doing and picking up the book and reading it and I was just like traipsing around my house like I literally had nothing else to do in life, And it was so fun. And it was so stress relieving. It was so fun. It was so like immersive. Like I felt immersed in the story. It's something like that. Like honestly, like, where it's just like I don't know. I was like, man, I need to do this with more books. Like I need to
Yeah.
need to like
Embody the
get in
story.
theme. Yeah, it's like a get in theme. And I'm like, you know what? What would it look like for me to dress up like a random Alice in Wonderland character and read that book? I think that could be really fun and drink tea and like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, there was something about that experience that was really different for me from a reading perspective than something I had done in a long time. And that was like, I don't know. It was just so great. I would tell people, like, if you're struggling
Yeah.
trying to find the joy in the story, maybe become the story. Feel like you're part
Yeah.
of the story. Feel like you're in that era. You're in that world. Like, what would you be doing if you were in that world? And then literally just play it out and read. And read
And
to have fun, like it's like, I don't know.
I love that. I love that. And honestly, when I find a story that I love, like, I love going places where that story takes place. And when I'm traveling, Goonies, I grew up on that. It was, like, one of my favorite. I loved the adventure and stuff like that. So when we went to Oregon, of course, we went to the Goonies house, and it was just, like, it was rekindling the joy of my childhood of thinking of that movie. And, of course, it's nothing like, it's just a house, although they have kept it up to date as the movie and the town. But there was something about just what you said. It captured the story. It captured the town, the mood. Like now I understand what it means. The fog and then seeing Haystack Rock out there and I think they're riding their bike down this steep hill. And I think we were driving on one of the hills. I'm like, this is probably the hill they were driving on. And I didn't fully appreciate what the town was like that they are trying to escape from or that they're trying to save in some respects. But also, what is a Goonie? Yeah, if you go to that town, you kind of get it. So there is something that the story just embodies that is like, couldn't we capture that in creative ways? And yeah, everything you said, I love that. My husband does this thing where whenever he reads a story, it's happening right now. And if he stops, he's like, I'll ask him about this story. And he's like, right now, he's waiting on the top of the mountain. And I'm like, ooh, what's going to happen next? It's like the Aeneid or something. So it's like ancient, but it feels so present. And so just the joy of like, it's happening right now, that really embodiment that you're talking about. I think
It's
that is
immersion.
so cool.
It's immersion. Like, think about why Harry Potter is so successful.
Right.
It's because people immerse themselves in that world. It's
Yes.
like it really truly is. If you can get people to immerse themselves inside of your story world, you will have lifelong fans because it's like, and you will find, I think, and I'm preemptively jumping the gun with this book that I'm reading right now, but I think that by the end of this book, because of the way that I'm going about reading this book, it is going to become one of those staple books in my life. Like, I feel
Right.
like it's like going to be something that I go back to all the time. And it's the same thing like with Alice in Wonderland. And people probably think, oh my God, has this woman like read anything else than Alice in Wonderland? It's like, yes, I have, but I'm obsessed with this story. And it's because I immerse myself in the world. Like, I will go to if you have an Alice in Wonderland themed pop up, if you have a cafe, there's a cafe like that I will drive hours to get to. Like, it's like, because immersing yourself in the world, in the story, it's
Mhm.
just so fun. And we see it in mass with stuff like Harry Potter, where it's just like, yeah, I think that's honestly like why it has so much success, is because people just immerse themselves in it and they have so much fun
Right.
playing in that world.
Which is why, a lot of the books that become so popularized in movies, the worlds are so well versed and they're so well written that you can, like, see them in your mind's eye, and then eventually, they create a franchise, and now you have movies, and you have Warner Brothers has created a Harry Potter world, so, like, you can go to these places, and I think there's even a community in the Carolinas that's, like, selling houses with Harry Potter themed houses, and they're actually really cute, but there's something so joyous, and that again, it's recapturing the spirit of the child because these are adults buying homes, not children. So obviously Harry Potter isn't impacting just the kids. It's like you
Yeah.
grew up with it, and so it's going to be fond you're going to be fond of it forever. And I think that's a lot of these stories. They're so impactful. Enjoy the process, enjoy the story, take the time. Like, Amber, I love that you're like walking around your house as a flapper. I mean, you could just cross over to Fitzgerald and you'd be good. Like, you could just stay
I
in the
would.
20s for a while.
Yeah, this is amazing. I could stay here forever. And it's the same thing, like I said, it's just like, yeah, that's another world and whatever. But like, even with the screw tape letters, I feel like it's the human experience. And then like you're leaning now into the human experience. So
Right.
like whatever is connecting with you, it's like lean into that. It doesn't have to be this like different
Mhm.
thing that you're not, I guess. It's like, because I don't have to, dress up and do all the things to lean into the human experience aspect and that world of that book particularly. So I think it works in so many ways. I don't know. I love the idea of doing it. It's
No,
like
I do
it's
too.
so fun.
I think what you're saying though, and I think this can apply in even smaller ways, is set the mood. Just enjoy it. Like, whatever book it is, just enjoy it. My thing is like, don't do it for the wrong reasons because there's so many right reasons to do it for. Make time for it. My mission is reclaiming that nostalgia for the child that used to hide under the covers and
I
read
know.
late
And
into the night.
it's so good. And you know what's like, you know what I think is another interesting aspect to what you're saying, and trying to do that, and maybe a challenge for some people to overcome, to getting to that place, and why I think setting the mood, setting the environment, setting
Right.
yourself up for like, I'm just going to read and have fun, and I have no expectations for like what's coming out of this, when I'm going to be done. I think one of the biggest challenges is that instant gratification that we're
Mhm.
dealing with. Everybody wants instant gratification. It's like almost like people read to rush through the reading to get to the end, to know what happened or whatever, right? It's the same way in which they binge shows. They need to watch
Yeah.
all of it like right away, right? To know what's going on. but there's this joy in the process
Yes.
of getting there. And so it's like, that's why it's like that setting the mood, creating that environment, like setting everything up and giving yourself time to be like, I'm just going to take this day or this half a
Yes.
day or this even 45 minutes,
Mhm.
whatever it is in your schedule to just be present in this. And like, let's get to wherever we're going. And then like your,
Mhm.
like your husband says,
Yeah.
right now I'm on the top of the mountain and I gotta go do whatever else it is.
No, can
But
you
I know where he is.
you don't even know, like, how complicated that became when he's reading the Divine Comedy and he's in the Inferno, and you're, like, descending the pits of hell, and he's, like he's only in the moment of the people that are upside down or the farters, and you're, like, you don't know what's gonna happen next, and I just get, "Yes, he's now among the farters." I'm like, "Okay, like, what is going on right now?"
He's
And it
basically in the airport. It's fine.
Exactly, and it's like, I resonate with this, but I really hope you get away from those farters. Like, I really hope that you just are able to get out of hell and the inferno and, finish that, but it's kind of torture to know that you're being tortured right now and wherever you are in that story. Yes, there and I okay, I'm just gonna say this last. I know that there's also people that really have never got into reading. I mean, I know a lot of people, and like you even said, like you're not gonna waste time reading stories you don't want to read. You're just gonna make sure that it's important. It's got to capture you in certain ways, and that's I think that's valid, and that should be the goal because we're inundated with a lot of stories, and I think they so many stories are worth our time, and to fully appreciate, like we just said, preparing a place to really encapture the feel of the book is a beautiful way to look at it. Creating space to make it happen, just allowing yourself time to rest your mind, get out of your head, let the author take you somewhere new, and maybe you learn something, maybe you don't, but just enjoy it. I remember my husband wasn't like his family, they weren't big readers. And one of the best advice that I gave him that I think really helped, and I think it's helped other people since, is he liked the movie The Godfather. And I said, well, he's like, if I wanted to read something, he's like, where should I start? He had this desire to read the classics just because he saw me reading all the time. So I always had downtime where I was reading. So I think he just wanted to read when I was reading and, something that we did together, but he didn't know where to start. So I said, well, you like the movie The Godfather, why don't you read The Godfather? Like, why don't you read the book? Because a lot of times movies aren't as good. They can be. In this case, I think The Godfather is such a good movie that, like, reading the book doesn't really take anything away. And I don't know that the book was better or not. I haven't read it, but he did. He found it at a used bookstore and he loved it. And that was his entry point into reading. So he found a story he already loved, and then the book gave him a perspective and a mindset that he didn't get from the movie because he got to go inside the character's head and it gave context to different parts of The Godfather that you don't really see. Because books give more of that than a movie can. So if you want to start reading, look for what you already love. Look for the stories you're already engaged with. And if there's a book about that story, read that. Start there, especially the adaptations. There's so many good adaptations right now, but the books usually are better. So you're not losing anything by reading the book. And so you can start there and you already know you enjoy it.
That's great advice.
It works. It really does. I've known several people that have started reading because of that. So, Amber, I think we've had a really great conversation. I know we've
Yes.
had a really great
Yeah.
conversation.
Always.
I mean, we could go for hours. We
Yes.
won't because it's a podcast. I know we're going to be coming back with something else, and you've been doing a lot of projects. But before we go, I want to give you the last word on what's going on with Ethis, what's going on with some of your projects, anything that you can share to our audience to kind of let them know. We're going to make sure to put links for Amber below so that you can actually go to her website and check things out there. But what else can you tell us about some of your projects?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I have so many projects moving. So with Ethist, we are in a great spot. We've gone fully online with the apothecary and Ethist recently, and that's a huge pivot and move for us. So it's exciting and there's a lot of unknowns, which makes me feel like we're on the right road. And we officially, as of right now, have the cleanest moisturizer, facial oil, and cleanser on the market. Moisturizer, I think, should be here like next week. The cleanser should be here shortly after. And then we officially have our trio, like our starter trio is the cleanest skincare that you can buy on the entire market.
So
So
when I get subscription box, it should be the new I
it will
think it's a
be
next month.
it
Yeah.
should be all the new stuff,
Yeah.
and so you will have the cleanest of the clean. We set a new standard. The champagne standard is what we're calling it for the skincare industry. And what that means is when I say cleanest, it means that there's three major lists that everybody looks to provide them information on if a skincare line is clean or not, and that's Sephora, Ulta, and Credo. And we have created a new list that surpasses all of their lists. And nothing that is on that list is allowed in our products. So our cleanser, moisturizer, and oil are officially all set in transpo or about to be here. And then so that starter kit will be some of the cleanest,
I
the
really
cleanest
can't
skincare
wait.
that you can buy.
I'm
And
so
yet so
excited.
effective. Yeah. So that's really exciting. And of course we're doing the rest of the line as well, but that and it's all in progress. And so that's going. We have a fun new project for the tech industry that we're working on. I don't want to give too much away on that because it's more of like a mystery thing that we're like messing with. And we have lots of new characters, like we were talking about, that are out and coming, and that's like super fun. And then, there's, I mean, so much more to come, so much more to see with what we're going to do with like the apothecary and all of the things that are going on online. And then in my side time, there's a lot of stuff I'm working on in terms of writing,
Mhm.
like just the different series that I'm either suturing up or just like getting started and diving into and just playing in those like animated worlds and stuff. And I think that that's just like something fun that I love to do. We'll see what happens with that in the long run. I don't know.
I'm really excited for those stories because I think they're really good and they have
Thank you.
so much richness to them and there's a lot of depth. So that's a long-term project. So people may not see that for a while. If we have the chance, we will keep you updated on Amber's projects creatively, but definitely go check out Ethist and champagneapothecary.com. I think they can go to ethist.com and champagneapothecary.com and then it gets them kind of in the same place. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
at this.com just redirects you to champagneapothecary.com.
Perfect. So thanks, Amber, for being here. And then we'll do some wrap up. And yeah, this was a great conversation. Thank
Of
you.
course.
Really. I love
Yeah,
it.
thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you all for listening and joining us for our last episode, the grand finale of episode 10 of the first season. We have reached the end. I want to thank Amber and Christina for joining us again. We're bookending this podcast by bringing back our inaugural guests. That was a real honor for me to have that conversation with Amber. And I hope that you all got something wonderful out of it. Think about stories in a new way. It's a process of understanding, but the whole goal and re-clarified vision that actually Amber kind of inspired. She challenged me to hone in on what the vision is about storytelling. What is it specifically? I'm testing this out to feel how it feels, but I think this first season is a testament to the truth and point of it all. I want us to all recapture the nostalgic joy of reading, of finding the stories we love wherever we have them. And I can help you with that. King RE Press, this may be the first season of Paper Cuts and Plot Twists, and this may be the last episode of that first season. But King RE Press just celebrated its second year anniversary. We currently have, 4 books published. One is my poetry book, Lamplighter Poems, and we have Rich Kopacz. He just published in February. You heard from him on the podcast. Tony Baker, he was our first author published with Anabel's Lion. His paperback just released this week. So he has a hardcover, paperback, and ebook that you can get now. Rich has the hardcover and the ebook. And Mary Ransome, Truth, A Story of Canree New West. That will be on paperback next Tuesday. So that's, I believe, June 24th, 2025. She will have hers in paperback, and you can get currently the hardcover and the ebook. We also have Michael Edwards, who is publishing his first book with us, and that is I Am From Idaho. And look for that. That is in July. So the press has been doing a lot, so we can really help you reclaim the joy of reading. And I would love to share more about each of our authors and books. You can check out our social media, check out our website at www.kingarepress. That's KINGARIPRESS.com. I will put the links for both Amber's and my website in the podcast notes, so go ahead and check there wherever you listen to our podcast. You can listen to our podcast in so many places. So you have found us where you prefer. Let your friends know about it. If they haven't started listening to it and you think they would get a kick out of our ramblings, please introduce them to our podcast. But I don't want to leave you just with the ending of this season. There is a lot on the horizon. We will come back with season 2. I've already started to think through and plan the direction of season 2. It's going to be season 1 is a jumping point for the next season. But I really do hope that throughout all of this conversation, that you will rediscover that joy that you had as a kid when you found the story that you loved, the book that you read that just enthralled you, that you would ignore everything else to read that book. We love the stories we love, and it's a very human thing to tell a story. So find a fireside, grab some friends, and spin some tales. This is the end of Paper Cuts and Plot Twists, Season 1, Episode 10. Thanks for listening.